There is a purge underway in Ukraine, a purge within the corridors of power. On target are scores of political leaders, leaders whom the president has deemed corrupt. They are being sacked from their posts, held accountable for their deceit. It is being called the biggest political shakeup. A shakeup that we must report on because it concerns not just Ukraine, but also leaders sitting in the West, who, remember, went out of the way and took pains to fund Ukraine's battle against Russia. And this purge poses serious questions for them. Questions like, was the financial aid they provided Ukraine misused? Did the funding fall victim to political malfeasance? Did it fill the coffers of Ukraine's corrupt officials? Over the next 4 minutes, we will try and answer these questions and tell you what the West has to say about this. First things first, let me break the story down for you. Why is Ukraine carrying on with this purge? Like I said, due to deep-rooted corruption within its ranks. Who was perpetuating this corruption? A host of people close to Zelensky. There is Vyacheslav Shapovalov, the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, Alexei Semenenko, the Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Vasyl Lozinsky, the Deputy Infrastructure Minister, Vyacheslav Negoda, the Deputy Minister for Development of Communities, Ivan Lukeria, another Deputy Minister for Development of Communities, Vitaly Muzichenko, the Deputy Minister for Social Policy, and Kirilo Timoshenko, the Deputy Head of the President's Office. Besides them, there are 5 regional governors who have also been sacked. They were in charge of regions like Sumy, Zaporizhia, Kherson, as well as the region around the capital, Kiev. The list is quite long. The point I'm making is short. A political crisis has gripped Ukraine, a crisis triggered not by the opposition or any external forces or Ukraine's perceived enemies for that matter, but the country's ruling politicians themselves. And wait until you hear the charges against them. The Deputy Infrastructure Minister has been accused of siphoning $400,000 from contracts to buy generators. Ukraine needed these generators to deal with its electricity shortages. The minister used the money to electrify his bank account. And last we checked, he had been put behind bars. The Deputy Prosecutor General was dismissed for leaving the country during martial law. Apparently, he went for vacation to Spain in December in a Mercedes car owned by a businessman who has been accused of running a black market for cigarettes. And that's not even all. This minister also tried blocking corruption cases to curry favor with his colleagues in the government. The charges against the others are not clear yet, but reports say that most of them have been asked to resign. Resign due to what? This Ukraine will not say. And why would it? It is in the middle of a war after all. Its ministers have been caught indulging in fraud amid this war. Speaking about the charges against them makes for bad press. So the Ukrainian authorities are tight-lipped about the matter. Meanwhile, the president is issuing subtle statements like these. Statements that paint this purge as a step towards reform. Let me quote, "Any internal problems that interfere with the state are being cleaned up and will be cleaned up." He goes on to say this is only fair, it is necessary for the protection, and it helps our reconciliation with the European institutions. We need a strong state and Ukraine will be just that, he says. Now, here's the thing. No matter what Ukraine says, no matter Zelensky's pledges on making Ukraine a strong state, the fact of the matter is that the country has always been corrupt. I know this may sound politically incorrect to those who sympathize with Ukraine at this point, but I'm only stating facts here. Ukraine, you see, has a history of graft and shaky governance. In fact, headlines by the West's own media houses once called Ukraine the most corrupt nation in Europe. This 2015 report by The Guardian being proof. Even before that, corruption had troubled Ukrainian society for a long time. Bribes or gifts were the way things worked for almost everything in Ukraine, be it public services, education, healthcare. The people had to bribe the officials to get the work done. And every time they could not deal with the rot, they hit the streets. Take the 2004 Orange Revolution, a series of strikes and protests. What triggered them? The presidential election that year. An election voters said was won by intimidation and fraud. The Viktor Yanukovych faced allegations of rigging. He eventually had to leave office. And some 10 years later, Ukraine was hit by another revolution, the Euromaidan movement, and this one also was over widespread corruption, abuse of power by the politicians, violation of human rights, and the influence of oligarchs. Plus, Ukraine's decision to choose closer ties with Russia in an agreement. And all of this led to a wave of demonstrations, with the people protesting for weeks at stretch. And then in 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky came to power with the promise of rooting out corruption. Yet in 2021, that is just 2 years after he became president, Ukraine was still ranked as the 122nd most corrupt country in the world. And even now, he is struggling with the same problem, carrying on with this purge, purging his ministers for misusing their office. Is this a sign that Zelensky has failed to tackle corruption? That for all his grand promises, political misconduct is still festering under his rule? It certainly looks like it. And what's worse is the timing of it all. This problem has reared its head again at the worst possible time, with Russian tanks surrounding the country, looking to capture large areas of the territory. Could this scandal have a bearing on this war? We don't know, but experts had issued warnings long back. Look at this report. The Wall Street Journal carried this in July 2020. It said that security officials in Western countries were worried that financial aid to Ukraine could be misused. Some of them had even informed the Pentagon about the possibility of arms and money either being diverted or stolen. And then in October 2022, editors at Bloomberg published this plea. They asked the Western leaders to appoint a watchdog for aid to Ukraine. They said more transparency was required on how Ukraine was spending the money. The warning fell on deaf ears. And now, with this purge underway in Ukraine and Kiev not giving much details about the charges, the West must initiate a probe into the kind of fraud that the ministers concerned committed. Was it related to the war? Did they embezzle war money as well? Did they misuse financial donations? These are questions that the West must ask Ukraine. If not for the sake of transparency, then for the sake of their taxpayers whose money is funding this very war. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.